Hello.
Hello, hello, hello. How
Uh,
are we doing?
Okay, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Enjoying the sunshine. Got a nice blue sky outside, which you can't really see, but yeah, it is there.
Getting most
Um,
of it.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, so let's kick off. Thank you everyone for joining today's live event. I'm really looking forward to this one. To kick off, um, just so everyone knows, this is being recorded. So don't ask any questions that let anything out sensitive. Um, and the recording will be shared with you afterwards. Today, we're going to be talking about running your first privacy program without slowing down. And we have the pleasure of being joined by two fabulous guests. Kaylee, I'll hand over to you first for a quick intro.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Kaylee. I'm the lead DPO at Trust Keith. I've been working in the field of data protection for definitely more than 10 years now, which ages me. Um, I originally come from an operations background though, so I have a very strong belief that anything that you do around data protection needs to be proportionate and needs to actually be fit for purpose. I'm very keen on data protection, not becoming the data protection police.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Kaylee. And Tom, over to you for a quick intro.
Mm. Oh, hey guys. So yeah, I'm Tom Blake. I am the group head of technology for the Jarrolds group based in Norwich. My background is probably IT. Started all the way from the bottom in IT support about 15 years ago, and I've worked my way up the proverbial ladder, should we call it. I have worked over the last kind of 4 or 5 years in London for a number of tech startup and scale ups, and I've recently, in the last 18 months or so, joined Jarrolds, who are slightly different than a tech startup. It's a 255-year-old group of businesses, where I look after the IT, tech, and data and privacy functions.
Nice. Thanks, Tom. 255 years old, that is impressive. Um, some serious years. Nice, thanks. So, yeah, very happy to be joined by Tom today. Look, the plan for today's session is really to talk a bit about, in particular, Tom's journey of building out a privacy program in the organization he's in today. Tom has worked very closely with Kaylee to do that. So we're going to talk a bit through. We're going to talk through the journey, how it came about, some of the challenges, how we're working together on that, and just give people some insight on what it looks like to build the first privacy program. Obviously, the DPO role often gets lumped on top of someone who has 100 different things on their plate, and Tom, you're obviously one of them as well. And yeah, so we're going to talk about how to get that balance right. Um, to kick us off, Tom, would you be happy to just give us a bit of background on Jarrell Group? And like you mentioned, that it's a group of companies. I think that's particularly important context. So yeah, any context you can share, that would be great, I think.
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, like I said, Jarrolds is based in Norwich. It's a 255-year-old family business. I believe eighth generation now. There's still a few Jarrolds kicking around that run some of our group businesses and are involved at the board level. Predominantly, we are a department store. Traditionally a retail offering, mostly direct to consumer. Though there are a bunch of other that we're not so famously known for, business service businesses. We have our own marketing agency. We run a logistics business. We have a professional training company, um, facilities management and cleaning. So lots of quite a wide breadth in terms of our business operations, customers, etc. Which comes with its, which is quite interesting, the breadth of it, but also comes with its own challenges when you just have the complexities as it scales out, and the breadth of it in terms of data and privacy. So.
Yeah, definitely quite a wide range. And to what extent are those like subsidiaries or different companies interconnected or operating kind of independently out of interest?
Yeah, so they all operate relatively independently, so all have their own, I suppose, management and leadership like structure, but all supported centrally by kind of group business services. I think it is a quite traditional model. So technology, finance, human resources, privacy, kind of all span across all of them. So lots of fingers in lots of pies, as opposed to each of them having their own dedicated functions for those bits and pieces.
Yeah, and then you as the looking after IT across all of those groups effectively. And is that the same for a lot of back office functions in the group? Are they all managed kind of centrally by like someone like yourself? Okay, cool. That makes sense. And then when thinking about data protection specifically in context of Jarrell Group, what for you have been some of the top kind of problems or challenges that you faced prior to kind of kicking off the privacy program in particular as well?
So I think for us it was just about clarity on where ownership of this really laid. I think it's quite traditional for this to get lumbered onto someone in IT or someone technical. So one understanding, just getting some clarity over who is responsible for it. I think there is a general vested interest and understanding we needed to do something about it. But I think one of the big points for us was actually just clarifying who was going to take ownership and have responsibility for it. So I would say that was our first starting point. Who was going to be responsible, and then I think the next that was probably the easy part because it was me. I was volunteered for it. I think the next step was like, where is the right place to start? We're really starting from building a from scratch, really from a foundation. There was a handful of policies of bits and pieces here and there, some kind of good practices, but I think really lacking um, a risk orientated approach and the breadth of what everything, considering everything that needed to be covered. We just didn't have that experience internally. So it was more about understanding, well, what should be the things we should be looking at, what is the right order and the priority to do those in, which then led us kind of onto the result of looking to sort of get some support with that externally, because we didn't have the experience or the resource internally to kind of go after it.
Yeah, it's difficult. A number of times I've heard people talk about you don't know what you don't know. So you kind of got to figure out what you don't know first and go from there. Kaylee, what do you think in terms of like challenges in Gerald Group from a data protection perspective? Obviously, you've got a lot of knowledge about how the group works.
Yeah, it's a really interesting mix of context in the Jarrold group because you've got, like this bricks and mortar retail offering, which is like an institution in the community. It's a name that people in the community know. And so that comes with like a whole bunch of like really interesting things that come along with it. First of all, like the direct consumer piece has its own risks, a department store. You've got lots of employees, potentially vendors that are working, so they're not employed directly, but they are still like wearing the Jarrold's brand in the store. Um, so there's lots of different risks, particularly associated with that. And on top of it all, there's, the fact that the reputation of that flagship piece of the business is so strong and can have such an impact on like the Jarrold's brand itself.
Hmm.
It is really, really interesting. And then alongside that, you've got all of these other really unusual kind of like business cases that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be paired with like a retail offering. You've got the marketing piece and
Yeah.
property and facilities management, all of those different things. And so there's so many different contexts within the business that actually having something really consistent across all of them, like it was always going to be a challenge because, different parts of this group have spun up at different times. They've got different approaches, different leadership, different data. And so being able to take that like unified view across everything and say, okay, well, where are the biggest risks? Where are your biggest public facing risks? Where are your biggest risks in terms of sensitive data? And taking a really proportionate approach to how you tackle it is important. There's too much there to try and do everything at the same time. So that like gap analysis and then where are the priorities is has been super key.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And as from my context, obviously, I speak to a lot of companies before they start using a DPO provider or before they start using TrustKey. And there's usually like one or two bands. There's ones where the fire has already started and we have to come in and sort something out. And then there's ones who are taking preemptive actions. From your perspective, Tom, what was it that like triggered you in particular to start looking into data protection? Was there anything in like a particular moment for you where you thought, okay, let's look into this?
Yeah, certainly. I think recently, or just after I started, it became a topic, kind of inklings at board conversations. I think there was definitely an influence of a number of high-profile breaches, especially across retail, over the past 18 months or so, that kind of asked us to look inwards and ask the question of like, like do we have sufficient measures in place? Are we confident that we're not going to get hacked in short? So I think there was bit of a realization to kind of acknowledge that we weren't in the best position and we needed to do something about it. And then that, that led us to say, well, what is the right way to push and move forward? Do we want to hire someone internally? How do we find the right person? What skills do we need? Do we look out to outsource at least something initially with a partner? So that led us down the kind of route of we don't know, like you said, we don't know what we don't know yet, but we know that we need to
Yeah.
do something. So rather than a long commitment or a huge engagement, big piece of work, we initially just wanted to start with a gap analysis to understand where we were currently at, to then kind of go away and I suppose seek input, support, seek some additional resource to then turn around and say, well, here's a position we're in. Where would you like us to get to, and what support are you going to give us to get there? So I meant initially our engagement with Trust Keith was a gap analysis over a kind of a 6 or 8 week period to get a really good understanding on where we were currently at, to then help shape how we then wanted to proceed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kaylee, anything to add there at all?
I mean, I would just add that I think the trigger point that Jarrolds had, which is, there was some external stuff that was happening. We all know about the M&S data breach. That was a really big thing. It impacted them really heavily, and was in that kind of same space. In a way, meant that, like in my opinion, Tom got quite lucky because his board were interested, were asking the
Yeah,
right questions, and gave him a mandate to go out and actually do something about this. Very often, that's not the way it happens, and it is like something, the trigger becomes the fire. So
yeah,
you've had a DSAR that you just, like, right now we're seeing quite a lot of stories about, you've had a DSAR and you just don't have a process for it, and there's a panic, or there's been a massive breach, or even there's been a near miss, and you suddenly realize, hang on, we don't know how to handle this. So, like, being able to take that external view and realize that there are some risks that you want to address, or at least that you want to understand what the gaps are, it's a really nice position to be in, because it puts you on the front foot rather than waiting for the fire that you have to then try and put out.
yeah. On that note, the number there, we definitely are seeing lots of tricky details and employee grievance related ones at the moment. So probably time for another webinar in the next few months on that. But I think, yeah, all makes sense. And Tom, I recall when we were running the gap analysis, it felt like a really good opportunity to engage other people in the business and data protection as well. Because sometimes there's a bit of a battle of making sure that other people understand why it's important and what the gaps are. So that felt quite useful at the time. Tom, also just one extra question on that. Is there any context you can share on like what other types of options that you looked at? Obviously not specific vendors, but in terms of like categories, were they consultancies, law firms, SaaS companies? Any context you could share there?
Yeah, I think I repeated the really simple question we got asked is, are we going to get hacked? And I think my initial consideration as an IT and as a technical person was to go down the security route, and then kind of starting to peel back the layers and understanding what we had set up and what we had and what we didn't have. Um, and where some of these more high profile kind of incidents and risks that we've seen over the past few years across the industry, they've all been like largely people driven and people related and process related, as opposed to a piece of technology has had a vulnerability. So kind of we did reach out to a couple of other businesses for a more security specific, I suppose, engagement. But I think actually what really resonated with us was that we could have the right processes in terms of technology, but you don't have the fundamentals in terms of policy and process. And arguably, a lot of this privacy stuff isn't solely for technology. It touches every part of the business. So I'm really glad we did, but we made the right decision to pick, I suppose, approach this from a privacy perspective that would then inform what security decisions we made.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. Kaylee?
Yeah, I just wanted to, like, talk a little bit about the gap analysis, particularly because, like, you've said it, and I think Tom said it, which is that you don't know what you don't know very often, and like being able to take that, like, backward step and a view across, as you say, like, data protection touches security, and it, touches AI, and it touches a lot of different pieces, but it's also much broader, and it's a cultural piece. And, like, a really big thing that people think about is, you think security, are we going to get hacked? Do we need, I don't know, better servers? Do we need, like, more encryption? Do we need more of this? And but actually, you look at the M&S breach, or you look at the Jaguar Land Rover breach, And the reason that the hack occurred was actually a people failing, right? Like it was
Mm.
a cultural issue. Someone made a mistake. And so that might not necessarily be caught when you're looking at these new layers of security. So that's one piece that I think is really interesting, like that cultural piece. But also, like sometimes a gap analysis will tell you what you don't know. And sometimes a gap analysis is really useful for someone who actually probably, like someone internal, does know or has an inkling that they know where the gaps are, but is having trouble being able to translate that into this is where we need to plug the gaps. And having that like validation, that external validation to say, yes, here is the control, here is our finding, can really help with that internal case around why you need something stronger or why you might need to make a change.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing that you've mentioned, I know you have a lot of sayings around how data protection is people protection, and I just feel like that's probably a relevant moment to bring that one in if you weren't already going to bring it in at some point.
I have actually not wheeled out my catchphrase yet, but
Where
yes,
is
you're
it? Come on,
right.
we're waiting.
Data protection is people protection. Too
It
true.
is. Yeah. So Tom, let's if we've got to a point where you're the lucky one that got lumped with data protection, congrats. You established from the board that you need to take some action, started looking at some different options. We've done a gap analysis, established that there are some gaps, and then effectively we started working. You started working with Just Keith and Kaylee. Could you give a bit of context on what the day to day looks like in terms of how you work with Kaylee and the team?
Yeah, definitely. I think and I'm hoping Kaylee's gonna not call me out on this one, but like it's really not like it's really nice to have someone who's almost like an extension of my team. Like I think we partner really well. I see myself as more of like an internal lead on this perspective. It's not that we're outsourcing it and we're giving it to someone else and paying them money and expecting them to just put a band-aid over it and checking your box to say that's done. There's a definite kind of very much a dynamic of I still, I suppose, internally manage the stakeholders, report on the progress and the updates, know what to push and pull, what to pass on to Trust Key for the support, kind of provide that, I suppose, internal context, decision making, etc., and then kind of really lean on Kaylee for um, the kind of extension of my team with that real domain and privacy specific knowledge. Like there's some stuff that we can definitely pick up internally, and a lot of that has been through being educated through Kaylee. It's not just a I'm just a middleman. There's definitely a feeling of being kind of upskilled rather than replaced. But it's really allowed me to be kind of I suppose dynamic with where and how I spend my time. And if I haven't got enough capacity to support with something, I know that I can reach and lean on Kaylee. We've got our kind of, a list of risks that we work through. We meet every month. We email kind of probably nearly every other day at the moment, which I'm sure Kaylee is probably going to say does a head in. But I think we've got a really good balance. I know when I can lean on for that support, but I'm also really empowered to kind of go away and continue to work on the things that either interest me, I know that I need to work on and maybe move a bit quicker with. But I know that I've got Kaylee at the end of the phone, at the end of an email, or there will be another kind of regular catch up around the corner where I can kind of ask those questions and get into the detail.
Nice, Kaylee. Anything you want to add?
I mean, I only need to say I'm very pleased to hear Tom say that it feels like I'm an extension of the team because that's really when it should that's how it should be, and that's when I think that these relationships work best. You know, the idea and our philosophy at Trust Keith is really to like we work best when we are embedded and we understand exactly what's going on in an organization and we can work as an extension of the team, you know, like yes, we are an external party that are coming in, but the point of any data protection, you know, a good data protection program needs to be bespoke to the business, and therefore you need to have a really strong understanding of how things work. And there's definitely a balance of, you know, sometimes there are some risks that we might need to push along, but you know, and there's the balance between the planned work that we have and the ad hoc, you know, oh actually I'm just going to ask Kaylee that question, which does work really well and helps to push things along really nicely, without it being a huge time suck and a huge time lift.
Yeah,
Nice.
and I think the lack of like something that's really structured as well really works for us, and I'm sure it would resonate with a lot of maybe other people in my position. Like we have a lot of operational changes, a lot of kind of commercial things that are happening that we need to be flexible and be able to support with, and with a very structured and rigid, I think, privacy program starting from where we did to where we're kind of aspiring to get to. a traditional project plan that meets certain milestones, but it just doesn't work. It needs to ebb and flow depending on what is coming up and what's most important to us, I suppose, at that moment in time. And that doesn't change on a daily or a weekly basis. That blends over, months and quarters. But it means that we are fixing and addressing the most important things, not just fixing problems, but also enabling, I suppose, future commercial opportunities that the business has been looking at, rather than being really kind of rigid and prioritizing what we want to get done, whereas we need to be conscious of what the business needs from us as well.
Nice. And I have a question for both of you. But like one of the benefits of hiring people in house to do this, obviously, a lot of the time companies don't meet the threshold to need to hire a full-time privacy manager or DPO. But one of the benefits of when you have somebody in house is that they have a really good understanding of your business and organization. So, Kaylee, maybe one for you, and then Tom, I don't know if you have any comments after. But like, how do you make sure that you can build up a good understanding of the business that you're supporting? Because obviously that's a really important component to feeling embedded.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And like a really big part of it is actually that gap analysis, like is being able to understand the gap analysis. But the cards on the table, that's a paper-based exercise. So you're only ever going to learn so much from that. You also need to have a bunch of conversations. So I've had a lot of conversations with Tom over the course of the last year. And the data mapping is really important. Like I'm basically creating the roper. But like really getting your hand stuck in, really like digesting all of the policies and all of the context that you get. And then the other part of it that is important, like in the longer term, for Jarrolds especially, is about like the is what we call data champions. So like people within functions who you can have a conversation with and say, hey, like what does this actually mean? What are you actually doing with this data? Like, how does this really work? How are you really doing it and not what you say you're doing on paper? And like Tom mentioned education and upskilling. Well, I mean, that's exactly it, like getting close to people and being able to talk to them to educate, upskill, empower them to come and talk to you and say that reach out. If you're not sure, if it's a data protection query, like I'm not a dragon, you can come and talk to me and that's okay. Or maybe I am a dragon, but you can still come and talk to me and that's okay. Like being able to just build those relationships to me is really key.
Yeah, Tom, anything you'd like to add? No worries if not. I can.
Yeah, I suppose just one, like we have a monthly like scheduled meeting. We talk often in between then. We have a quarterly risk committee that a member of our kind of executive from our board joins every quarter. I think how Kaylee gets that insight and we understand kind of where we need to be flexible and how to integrate the works is we don't start a call or when we catch up and the first point of conversation is what policy we're rolling out next or what specific piece of work are we doing. The conversation is around what's going on at Jarrolds.
Yes.
What's going
Yes.
on?
Yes. Yeah.
What's on the horizon? What are you most worried about? And it's about one, Kaylee, I suppose, being inquisitive, also be about being transparent. Like nothing is ever always perfect, but I think if we can do the 80% and be transparent about what is going on, and show that I can trust and trust the support from Kaylee, then I'm pretty confident we can kind of support the business with what it needs. So I think, yeah, it's just shaping that conversation around what do you need from me, what's going on, and even if it might not be relevant, there's some I'm sure stuff we'll come to shortly around like business new kind of commercial opportunities and things we've been exploring, and they might be 2 years down the line, but I think it's the
Mhm.
this is what's happening. Here are the discussions, conversations that are happening internally to give Kaylee that context, so then she can start to map all of this together to understand. Well, actually, I can see that coming in the future that we should start addressing now.
Absolutely. Yes.
Word
Kaylee, go
there,
on.
though. Sorry, that Tom said trust, and like I think that's the thing, right? Like you've got to have trust. You've got to have trust that when you talk to your person about data protection, they're not suddenly going to start flashing a siren and saying, "Whoa, stop! You're not allowed to do that."
Don't do
Because
that. Don't do
if
that.
like,
Yeah.
if you do that, if you are the data protection police, and if you only ever say no, people stop coming to you with the questions, and they just start to bypass you. And so there has to be that trust. There has to be the open, honest conversation that says, "Look, we know we're not all the way there yet. What's the risk around this? What can we do?" But also, it is about not slowing down. It's about making sure that the advice is proportionate and fit for purpose at any given time.
Yeah, agreed. And again, I'm not a DPO, but I've probably been on or attended lots and lots of risk committees, maybe 100 or so, and definitely like the best ones. And the way they should start is with a business level conversation about what you're doing in your business. Don't worry about data protection, and we can start to pull out the data protection priorities from that. So, Tom, I think that's an excellent point. On that note, speaking of like data protection and commercial opportunities, I think again there's maybe a misconception that data protection is just about stop the fines and stop the breaches and really it should be about unlocking what's coming next in the business. So is there any context you'd like to share on like how we've done that over the past year or so working together?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the benefits of working across a group is that we've all got our own customer base, right? And I think we've certainly wanted to look and are trying to leverage different customers across the group, especially when we've got B2C, B2B. We do across all of them we do a blend of not all of them, I suppose, to consumer, but a lot of them we do some B2B bits and pieces with. How do we, in the right way, share that data across that group? Two completely different endpoints in terms of customers, right? Business customers, personal customers. So kind of navigating that challenge that each business trades as its own entity. So we need to have the right privacy measures in place. We need to have the right controls in place. We need to make sure we've got all of that captured in our ROPA, where and how that gets shared. So it's the paperwork, it's the boring stuff, but actually we make sure we're doing it in the right way. I mean, we've got our retail database has been growing since email became a thing and people were signing up to newsletters probably in the early 2000s. There's a huge potential there for us to take advantage of that. And we're not in the day and age anymore of where we're just plastering out commercial offers on emails on a daily basis in a week. We want to be clever with how we're using customer data to really tailor and be specific about what we're sending people. So our marketing team would come to me all the time and say, "Hey, can we do this? Or what about this is a really good idea?" And we're not putting on the blockers, but we're helping shift and shape them into the right way, and arguably also like empowering them so that they don't feel the need to come to ask us for permission to do their job. They are educated and knowing where their boundaries are and when they might need to come in for some support. So I think those two like we're working on, I suppose, that are our day to day at the moment. Jarrolds is also looking at renovating our. We own a grade one listed amazing building along the river just in the middle of the city centre and transforming that into a 88 bedroom 5-star hotel. And
Ooh,
that's
nice.
coming in the hopefully that's coming down the line in a few years' time. But the groundwork starts for that now. How do we get customers data in? How we build that excitement, that engagement? How do we utilize our other customers that we've got already to share and show interest into that? It sounds really simple, but we have to kind of have the right provisions, policies, agreements in place to share data across the group in a legal and compliant way, to be able to begin marketing that, so that as that grows and scales, and hopefully when the doors open at a date in the near future, we've got it fully booked and we're able to support, I suppose, with that commercial element of that new venture.
Nice. One, I think the mindset of making sure that you're getting ahead of that stuff is really important. And that's going to be a big ingredient that makes you successful. And two, I hope our next risk committee, when that hotel opens, is at the hotel and we can do
Me
that
too.
one in person. Yeah.
I'm looking
um,
forward to my invite to the
yeah,
opening.
well, Kaylee, I'm inviting myself along, even though I'm not usually on them. But yeah. Kaylee, over to you. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like the piece around thinking ahead is really key. Like, how can you think ahead? Because ultimately, people are more and more aware of data protection. They're more and more aware of their privacy rights. And if you can plan ahead, and like the technical thing is like data protection by design and default. So if you can be thinking about data protection before you start doing things, you're actually going to save yourself a hell of a lot of time in the back end trying to fix things. It's much easier to do things at the start than it is to try and fix things. So like being able to have those conversations and take the long view and think, okay, well, what are we planning? What are we thinking about? How can we think about doing this well early? How can we think about leveraging the data sets that we've already got to bring this into play? All of that's really useful. And on the kind of note of thinking about the things that you already have, and something that we're seeing across everyone, lots of customers, lots of like anecdotal conversations everywhere is around AI. Like everyone now is kind of thinking, that having that dreaded "what are we doing about AI" conversation. Um, and there's an increasing recognition, like lots and lots and lots of organizations have got huge amounts of data that they are sitting on, like that this historic data. Some of it's been sitting unstructured for a long time, but there's a general sense that like there's probably some really good potential there, but a fear of like how you actually leverage that, like what can you do with it? And so, in some instances, like it's absolutely right to be cautious, but there's a difference between being cautious and being prepared and doing things well and just leaving stuff on the table because you're too scared to touch it. And so like being able to tread that line between doing the right thing and leveraging the impact of the stuff that you have is really important.
Yeah, makes sense. And AI popping up even more than DSARs. So yeah, definitely lots of that. Um,
Just
Tom, from your perspective, now that so if we've got to a part of like you've got into a kind of rhythm of working with Kaylee and building things out, what would you say are some of the outcomes that you've been able to deliver for the business from a privacy perspective?
Um, it's definitely the shift to being more proactive than reactive. If something happens, we now tend to have something in place, whether that's a DSAR, whether that's a new supplier contract, whether that's a new idea that someone wants to execute. We're willing and ready to support there and then, as opposed to then having to go away and I suppose delay that. I think a lot more structure across the business and just a general kind of understanding of the importance of data and privacy and actually having some formalized processes to back up. I know it's important. I'm sure all the people I talk with know that it's important, but when we have a policy that's been signed off and everyone's aligned to, it just helps support that conversation rather than, well, we should do it because it's best practice, but there's no way I can point to that kind of says that. Um, I've had kind of regular presence at the board and with our more, I suppose, senior stakeholders across the business. Like, it just gives me a lot more confidence to go and speak to them to show our progress. Like, a really great way that we do that is to have a score, and it sounds really simple, but trying to quantify where we were at in terms of we need to do some work here, guys. To, hey, we're on a journey and it's improving month on month, quarter by quarter. To be able to point at a number on a wall is really great, and see the scale go up, as opposed to saying, well, it was bad and it's now a little bit better. So something tangible like the risks, as such as the risk score that we use is quite nice. I always get asked about it, regardless of whether they actually care and are interested in all the stuff that happens behind. It's like, what's the score this month? And I kind of go, oh, it's in here. It's great. So yeah, I suppose would be the yeah, the key outcomes and things that have changed so far.
Yeah, but the fact that people are asking about it says to me that like something's working. Like that's a really really good positive thing, and I've always been pleasantly surprised by how effective the scoring system is at engaging people and getting them involved. Because it's a celebration when it goes up, but sometimes when it goes down, it's like, oh, okay, and it's a better way to kind of hold accountability. Kaylee, what about you? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, there have been huge improvements across the business from day one, and it is reflected in the score, and it is a really kind of simple thing to pull on and to look at. But if I look at the way that Jarrolds' score has changed over the course of the last year, like there's a definite upward trend, and that's really nice to see. But I think now where we're getting to is we're starting to really get to a stage where we're developing a lot more maturity, as Tom said. Like a lot of it is more feels more proactive when things are coming up, even if we've not got to them yet, we've got a plan for when we're getting to them. We know that that gap is there. I'm way more confident now on like the contents of the data register, which is more of a kind of technical thing, but it's a really important jumping off point for everything else that we do. And so that that increasing maturity, it is really important, but it is important to note. And I think you kind of alluded to it when you said the score can go down there. Like it's never a one-time fix. You don't do things and then they're done forever. You need to review, you need to go back, and maintaining takes work. Like another one of my corny things, but like data protection is like brushing your teeth. You don't do it and then it's done. You have to keep doing it. And so it's like that. You have to keep doing it, and that awareness and kind of bringing it back. But like it's always about progress over perfection. Like doing something, making progress is better than like, not doing it because you need it to be perfect.
Nice. And Kaylee, so that's a question, but is there any context you can share on like how the score goes up and down and like what actually what drives that?
Yeah, so our score is like what goes into it is a set of 48 controls that are kind of derived from a number of different sources. And altogether they make up what we would consider to be a best in class privacy framework. Within each of those controls, we link them out to a risk, and we look at the program on a risk basis. So we'll say maybe for each quarter we're going to focus on 2 or 3 of the key risks, and I don't decide by myself that they're the key risks. The platform doesn't decide that they're the key risks. That's what those conversations are about. It's like, okay, what's the most important thing for you? Where is your key risk right now? What do we want to focus on? And then we break those down into actions and we say, okay, Tom, you're going to go away and you're going to do this bit. I'm going to draft this and then I'm going to send it to you for approval. And we're going to roll that out. And as we go through those actions and we tick them off, we treat a risk. As you treat the risk, the score changes. So, as you move the risk from not in place to partially in place, there'll be an improvement. As you move it to fully in place, there'll be another improvement. If we were then to go, well, actually, we've not reviewed that for 3 years and we know that there's an issue, we'd bring it down. So it would no longer be in place, and then you'd see the score tapering out.
Nice, that makes sense. And then going back to those kind of risk committees where we're talking about what's happening at a business level, I guess that's why that's so important, right? We understand what's going on in the business, find the risks that makes most sense, and then effectively start tackling them together.
Exactly.
Nice. Okay, makes sense. On that note as well, obviously, for those who don't know, we're an expert-led business. We have a team of fabulous DPOs like Kaylee. They are they're supported by the platform. For context, many years ago, we started off more as a consultancy, and we've slowly productized the journey of managing a privacy program over the years to a point we've now got a full kind of operating system. Primarily, that's a tool for the DPOs to use, and we like to say it kind of gives them superpowers. But Tom, from your perspective, is there any context you can share on interactions you've had with the platform and where you've seen it be beneficial to your role?
Yeah, definitely. So, the first and I think my most important and favorite piece of this is being able to come back to like a single place where I can track everything, our policies, our ROPA, our previous incidents, a clear overview of our risks, and obviously the score that tends to be hopefully trending up in a one direction. To have all of this in one place in a format that can be quite easily navigated, very simple to use, is great. I mentioned the roper in there. I've in my previous roles, and we started to have a look at this. How do I map out where all my data comes from, is stored, is processed, is used? What type of data is it? Who uses it? Who's responsible for it? Who's the owner? I'm trying to do that in a spreadsheet is really painful. I've never seen a good one. So if anyone on this webinar can send me a great roper spreadsheet, I'd be really grateful. But I've never seen one happen. But to have this in the TrustKeith platform, to be able to come in and pick one of my group businesses to understand what data they're using and processing, and there's a change to it. It's really simple for me to see what's going on. And then that translates into, well, what happens when we get a DSAR? What happens when something needs to change? We're changing a platform, we're introducing a new platform. I can just come into one place, understand what data it's related to, what processes it's related to, and just make a really simple change. And I've just got this evidence like that's available to me all the time in a really kind of clear, easy, digestible format. So I think it sounds really simple, but the basics are just very easy to have it in all in one place. And rather than having folders on SharePoints and people's desktops and files that get emailed around, like one big I suppose a very important processing activity for us is around our CCTV. Our department store is in the centre of Norwich. It's 4 floors. We have a team of kind of 8 or so security staff. We've got over 100 cameras across the store, internally and externally. Like that, there's a huge amount of considerations we need to make for that, and we need to be really clear over the what, the why, the how, who this can all be shared with. If it's buried in documents, buried in spreadsheets, if it's not communicated and it's not clear, I don't understand when if I don't understand where I need to go when someone makes a request or asks for a change or asks for the what and why we're doing this, like I can't do my job, and I can't support the business in making sure we mitigate any of those risks. So I think for me, the most practical example is just the simplicity of how to come to one place to see it all, rather than having a whole mishmash of documents, things that arguably don't get updated, right? They don't get tracked. Like we would have a list of risks we've generated once, and then we just forget about them. So yeah, coming back to that, every meeting with Kaylee, whether it's monthly or we review it quarterly with our CEO that joins our quarterly risk committees, to me, like it just makes the conversation really simple.
Kaylee, I see you nodding. I know you love the roper, the data register, we call it. Yeah.
I do. I had, when I first started this role, surprised myself by how much I immediately became like a product evangelist. Because I thought before, like I was an in-house, in-house head of privacy for an NGO. I thought that I had a cracking roper. It was great. It had all of the lines in the world, but it was a very unwieldy spreadsheet, right? Like it just was. It did the job and it got it done. But being able to like look at a roper that you can easily move between, where you can see the different pieces, it is great. But the most important thing about it is that it's not just a roper in isolation. Like it links out to everything else. Like it's a privacy ecosystem. So my roper links to the DSAR flow, links to a breach incident, links to transfer risk assessments, and all of those things kind of link together in a way that, like, unless you were much better with spreadsheets than I am, you're not going to be able to manage on a spreadsheet, all of those interconnected pieces. It is really cool. I mean, my favorite feature is the DSAR flow, because again, like I used to be the head of data protection for an NGO. Dealing with DSARs is painful. Like it's just painful. And being able to kind of run it through a flow that shows you really simply, okay, here's where we're at. Here's where the clock's at. Here are the bits of the data register that we need to go and search. Here are the people that are in charge of that. Here's the next step. Like it's just good. Like it's the kind of thing that I wish I had when I was doing those when I was in the in-house role. So I love it.
Nice. Thanks. I think so. That's everything, Tom. Unless there's anything else you'd like to add, then I'm going to wrap up. And I think I'll wrap up by saying I think like a really so when you look at what makes a successful privacy program, there are a couple of different ingredients. Having an excellent DPO, obviously, very high up on the list. Having buy-in from senior leadership, but I think probably the most important one is having an internal owner like Tom, who takes it really takes it really seriously, has the right mindset, and I think you set a very high bar, Tom. So shout out to you for that. And it makes you an absolute pleasure to work with. So thank you. Thanks for joining us on the webinar today. And thank you for everyone that's on the call. If you have any questions, you can send them through to either us on our email addresses. I'll also include Tom's LinkedIn so that you can contact him if of interest as well. So yeah, once again, Tom, thank you. Kaylee, thank you as always. And we'll catch up soon.
Thanks,
Nice
everyone.
one.
Thanks.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.